The trouble was is that it was an escape into yet another prison. Only it seemed to be. It was. I would say it was. Yeah, it was decorated much more nicely. More etherically. You had a bit more freedom to do certain things.
Well, like the Matrix.
Like the Matrix movie. So you're one of the Matrix movers and shakers instead, and perhaps you can come and go in the blink of an eye, but you didn't. You were still trapped, albeit at a higher level.
Yeah, and even in that movie, the Oracle talks about when you see things like UFOs and ghosts and all that, that's a program that's running and it's out of control. I thought that was an interesting way to describe it. It wasn't supposed to do that. It's doing something it wasn't supposed to do.
And this lovely cookie and milk serving oracle that seemed to also be a hostess for some unusual children with unusual abilities turns out to be just part of the Matrix program, but perhaps one of the higher level game operators herself.
Yes.
And at the very end, many people thought the good guys won, that mean rooting for the humans, but they didn't realize that they did not win. It was just a makeover. So, there were, though, those unusual cases where due to, we'll just say, weak zones in the control systems, that the higher consciousness, the higher gnosis, whatever you want to call it, that emanates from what I like to refer to as creator of all or true creation, makes its way through. And it would be very difficult to derive this kind of knowledge through inference. The people who wrote of these things, who seem to have inferred the existence of a creation system outside of this creation system that was of a different nature, I don't believe they truly inferred this. I think they tried to find a way to demonstrate this through discourse and logic to other humans, to at least be open to this possibility. So it was their way of teaching and trying to explain themselves in a way that some humans who could understand them could at least comprehend and consider. But I think that the origins of this knowledge came directly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anyone's ever really written about it in that way. They've always based it upon the records and what people's translations and all of this.
Well, Mayor Baba was one who, he didn't speak. He used sign language, but he talked about this being a creation, a false creation within a creation.
Yeah.
And so, he goes into detail about some of that stuff, and I know you've studied others that have spoken about that as well. But we're interested in the highest possible, this
has been a problem now. We've had how many thousands of years, hundreds of thousands, where the very existence, knowledge of the existence of a realm of creation that those of us that have a sense of this would call true creation, even existed, was concealed, hidden, every way possible, denied through all different means. And of course, the more primitive and simple humans were, the less important this was. But as as different civilizations, developed, this would have to be,
Well, now we have cell phones and we eat McDonald's burgers.
Well, but the question, even today we have various well-known global figures who are talking about, suffering is a requirement of human nature. That this is the way things always are, and that's the way it is, and you just simply have to overcome your own karma. I mean, all of these are dark force teachings.
Oh, absolutely.
Some people like to think that it's enlightening. It's not.
No.
It's most disheartening and unenlightening when you really penetrate to the truth of it. So one of the big paradigms has always been, and the biggest secret, that did this, if one can at least acknowledge the existence of a distorted creation in which there's polarization, there's conflict, there's control hierarchies, all of this kind of thing. We'll call it, the fallen zone. If you can acknowledge that there are these levels that exist of that nature, whatever their purpose is now, we're not going to argue that point, but that they exist, then the question is that was that created deliberately from the highest levels of creation as a deliberate program or impulse of some kind, or not? Or was it the result of what some of us would call a cosmic error?
My own feeling is that it was tampering and then it was a cosmic error.
Well, this is an important point because many people at an ordinary level say, well, why does God allow suffering? Why the innocent must suffer so, you see? I mean, these are basic things. Why was this life taken, or why was it so awful? And so far the only explanation was, oh, well, it's God's will, next life, or some karmic thing, or what have you, or that was the lesson they wanted to have. And all of these are false notions that are meant to encourage people to accept how things are and stay within a control sphere.
Yes, exactly.
But, I mean, this is a basic question that was argued, debated, and literally fought over for quite a while, and that was, even at the highest levels, is this still a dark side, distorted, kind of twisted version of something that's mimicking a different kind of creation? And is there something else outside of this that does not operate and does not require polarity consciousness conflict in that regard? Well, many people believe that's not the case. For whatever reason, they've come to believe that, and they've accepted that.
Yeah.
And so what we have then are just those individuals who think, well, at best we'll just be a good human, we'll develop good ethics, maybe we'll be good stewards on the planet, but it's still a limited state of consciousness.
They're very limited, especially when the corporations are, trashing the whole planet in an almost seemingly scorched earth policy.
Yeah.
So, one person taking out the garbage and recycling pales in comparison with dumping trillions of gallons of chemicals into rivers and oceans and the rest of us. So, as I see it, there's a major correction that seems to be on its way or needs to be made. And this is where you come in with the idea of something that you've called the corrective energies. And I thought maybe you might want to talk about that for a little bit.
I just wanted to just add a couple thoughts on this ascension business first.
Okay.
So initially, and for such a long time, it became an escape. And even for those people today who say, I wish to live in a higher level of existence, I wish to have expanded consciousness, etc., etc., there still is an overwhelming negative involved. In other words, it's a rejection of what you do not want.
That's right.
And the question I pose to people today is that it is very, very important. It is as if your spiritual life depends upon it. What is your primary attractor? Forget about what you don't want and you don't like. All that's good and fine, and you set that aside. Now, what is it you aspire to as a higher being? Rather than think you're a spiritual being having a human experience, consider the possibility that you are a human being having a spiritual experience.
Oh, okay.
And this raises something that I believe that back when all of this New Age stuff was first concocted, it was designed ultimately to do everything possible to the last moment to prevent as many people from accessing this information and energies. And, frankly, a lot of people, when they just discover the notion of a higher self, or however they encounter it, even if it's just through inspired reading, it doesn't matter. People can be imaginative, or they've had an unusual experience. It is easy for the human being to then start thinking still in separation, that they are they, and other is other, and higher self must obviously know everything, and you've got all these guides telling, that, or someone will channel them and tell you what they're telling you for guidance, or they're going to give you nonsense and say, well, we won't interfere, it's your own choice. Well, even that's a lie.
Right.
And so,
that's a big one.
Well, the trouble is that there's many millions of people who follow such poor guidance, or notions of guidance. And, that alone is a fallacy. The question here then becomes one that a critical human mind can penetrate, at least as an important question. And that is, if you do not have true free will, because after all, humans have grown up in a cultivated environment that was deliberately to deny even knowledge of true free will.
Right.
So, therefore, humans cannot even be held fully responsible for all the problems that exist today. Something else has set up a game, not even told them the rules, let alone that they're in some kind of a situation.
Yeah.
And so how can people act otherwise, including making very bad and dumb decisions? It doesn't mean you're not responsible or accountable, but I mean overall, and this is another secret, that we'll call it the dark side teachings that come through both religions and New Age and other kinds of things. It tells people that humans are responsible for all of this, and it is their fault. And I find that to be a terrible falsehood. I've been an advocate on the part of humans, to give humans every possible opportunity and all the breathing room necessary, to get to a slightly more evolved stage to make more of a transition, to make it at least to the threshold of the bridge, if not partway over the bridge themselves, if possible, and not pull the plug prematurely. This has been a very important question because for so long, from the very, very higher levels, there was barely any idea that there was a serious problem here in the human Earth situation. And this is another secret that has never been disclosed. And likewise, so if there is not information and knowledge moving back and forth between...
Is that because of the density?
Yes, this has a lot to do with it. When this is an unusual situation in creation, this is not just an ordinary problem of an infestation of the dark. Through the use of higher level consciousness as well as through the use of various extraterrestrial, semi-organic, and inorganic control forms and other things like that. This is a serious thing because this particular dot, this zone, was to have been a place that potentially would be like a womb of creation.
Yes.
To me, when people talk about what's the Holy Grail, that's the Grail. In other words, it's the template. I don't mean the implementation. It's the template of the notion of sentient human biology. That is a bridge between matter level consciousness and density and a higher level. And that this was to be one of a relatively rare number of gardens, so to speak, to use the garden metaphor. And I'm not speaking about gardens of Eden. That's a whole different scene. But I'm just saying, since I'm a mad gardener myself, that this was to be one of those sorts of places in the larger creation that potentially could give birth to new creator beings. In order to do that, there had to be the completing of knowledge, experience, and we're talking spiritual wisdom now, that comes from having intimate experience at all the possible levels of creation, right down to 3D density and the kinds of things that are needed to maintain coherency of what we call matter, which is another subject that pertains to the changes today. It is a complicated thing to touch on in the next 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to skate around this as fast as I can, but this is, this is how complex the problem was. And so when you mention the term density, think about it just in terms of denseness, in terms of perhaps obscuring vision of what was going on here. And let's just say that something that we refer to as the dark happens upon this and looks at it and goes, wow, what an opportunity. Because their holy grail has been to seek their own form of ascension, since they're limited by their own inherent limitations, their own,